Why I Am Not a Hindu by Kancha Ilaiah is a book that combines personal experience with political upheaval. Ilaiah, who was raised in a Dalit community, had the unique experience of viewing firsthand the differences between upper caste communities and lower caste communities. He observed and argues in his book that the majority of these differences come from whether the community is Hindu or non-Hindu. Ilaiah discusses children, family relations, gender, marriage, and eventually politics and religion to explore how a Hindu-based community is one that does not benefit India as a whole. He argues that many of India's problems, specifically its human rights issues, come from Hindu ideals, and that India's future must be in a rejection of Hinduism and an embracement of Dalitization. There are a number of positives in Ilaiah's writing, beginning with his own personal story of growing up a Dalit in India. Ilaiah introduces the reader to life as a Dalit child versus life as a child from an upper caste family. He then explores the relationship between the two and how they were allowed to interact with one another. He gives the example of their being able to play with one another as much as they wanted, but that eating together was another issue. They could do so, but they had to sit far apart from one another. Ilaiah also discusses how once he entered school, he was bombarded with gods, languages, and texts from a culture that was completely alien to him. He had never heard of Brahma or Vishnu, and languages spoken by Brahmin, Baniya, and Kshatriya children were completely unfamiliar to him. Ilaiah also explains how women from his community differed from women in upper caste Hindu families. In his community, women were allowed to socialize with men in the community, to drink, eat, and smoke with them and their female elders. As Ilaiah puts it, women were at least notionally equal to men. On the other side of the divide, upper caste women were never seen as equals to their husbands or to any other man in their community. Ilaiah also explores how Hindu mythology has helped shape women's roles in India. From a young age, Hindu women are given the image of Sita to emulate, to be beautiful, passionate, and completely submissive to the will of their husbands or any man they encounter. Non-Hindu women, however, are given no such symbol to mirror, and instead rely on the women who raise them to offer guidance on how a woman should behave in her community. All in all, Ilaiah spends a great deal of time explaining the vast differences between how a Hindu family and community raise their children, and how a non-Hindu family does the same. Ilaiah places the non-Hindu methods in much higher regard than the Hindu methods, and it is here that the flaws of the text begin to appear. Ilaiah is obviously biased, showing favoritism towards the non-Hindu communities, in other words, his communities, and leaves Hindu communities to represent the abusive, sexist, and violent caste image in India. Ilaiah also has a tendency to get wordy when he wants to add credibility to what he's writing. The chapters that deal with his family life are remarkably easy to read. There are native terms that are used that sometimes add a few stumbles to the reading, but for the most part, the beginning chapters aren't at all difficult to understand. It isn't until Ilaiah begins talking about Hinduism on a whole, Dalitization, and Neo-Kshatriyas that his writing becomes unintelligible. Ilaiah seems to suffer from an unfortunate side effect of writing a serious piece of literature, unintentional obfuscation. His writing goes from fluid and comprehensible to complicated and wordy in just a few chapters. It's difficult to tell if these sections were written in the heat of the moment, or if they are simply so over-edited that they become useless to the reader. Ultimately, the book provides a powerful message that should not be ignored. Ilaiah's ideal India, one that includes gender equality, open education, secularism, and self-respect. It is these four qualities that Ilaiah sees as distinctly non-Hindu and Dalit specific, and, more importantly, as qualities that should be held by every Indian individual, regardless of caste or class. This is at the center of Ilaiah's written manifesto, and the foundation for what he sees to be the beginning of a better India.